Sometimes, a man arrives at the edge of his own life without realizing it until the ground beneath him shifts. For Brenner Hale, that moment struck the instant he stepped out of his battered pickup and stared at the abandoned mountain cabin he'd bought with the last of his savings. Cold wind rushed between the pines, as if warning him away, but he pushed forward, boots sinking into the soft earth. At 46, worn down by divorce, debt, and the slow erosion of purpose, he had nothing left to cling to except this forgotten structure buried deep in the Montana woods. Yet when he forced open the warped front door, expecting emptiness and rot, he found a room frozen in time. Heavy workbenches, jars of perfectly sorted screws, shelves lined with journals whose spines formed an orderly timeline stretching back to the late 1960s. And scattered across the largest table lay blueprints for a machine unlike anything he had ever seen, half assembled as if its creator had stepped out only minutes before. The air smelled of old wood and cold iron, the scent of a life interrupted. Something stirred in Brenner's chest, curiosity, longing, maybe even a flicker of hope. Whoever had lived here had worked with purpose, precision, vision. And as the fading sunlight filtered through dusty windows, Brenner realized he hadn't stumbled into a ruin. He'd stepped into the remnants of a mind still alive on the page, a life's work waiting for someone, maybe anyone, desperate enough to listen. And for the first time in years, he felt the pull of something greater than survival, something like destiny. He spent that first night on the cabin floor, wrapped in a sleeping bag beside a crackling fire he coaxed from logs the previous owner had stacked with care. As the flames rose, Brenner opened the first journal, its leather soft, its ink steady, the handwriting belonging to a man named August Vance. Page by page, the cabin's history unfolded, a young builder carving a life from the wild. August wrote with a rare mix of grit and tenderness, documenting how he'd built the cabin stone by stone, how he'd married the love of his life, Sarah, and how they'd forged years of quiet joy together under these same pine shadows. But as the decades passed across the pages, the warm entries shifted. Sarah's illness arrived like a winter that refused to break. August held her through her final weeks, then poured every ounce of grief into invention, experimentation, and the relentless pursuit of a single idea. A self-sustaining water pump powered by natural flow. No electricity, no dependency, just pure engineering elegance. Brenner felt August's loneliness echo inside his own. He read until the fire sunk into embers, until the ink blurred, and the weight of someone else's devotion left him breathless. Before sleep took him, he whispered a promise into the dark. "I'll take care of this place." He didn't yet know what that meant, or what would be required of him, but he felt the truth settle deep inside. He wasn't alone here. Not really. August had left a path, and whether by fate or desperation, Brenner had stepped into it. Days bled into a rhythm. Brenner patched leaks, scrubbed floors, restored railings, and wandered through August's workshop like a man walking through a cathedral. The deeper he explored, the clearer it became. August had no hobbyist. This space belonged to a craftsman engineer whose mind never stopped moving. Tools hung precisely on pegboards, their outlines traced like sacred signatures. Blueprints layered across workbenches showed countless redesigns of the pump, iterations, refinements, breakthroughs. And then Brenner discovered the hidden door behind stacked lumber, a larger workshop, concealed deliberately, lit by skylights that washed the room in pale morning gold. At its center stood the unfinished pump, its steel bones gleaming under dust. When Brenner unfurled the main blueprint, he understood why. The design was brilliant, too brilliant to abandon. A water system that could serve not just one home, but an entire community. The margins were filled with August's calculations, notes, dreams too large for one lifetime. That discovery hit Brenner harder than he expected. The machine wasn't simply a mechanism. It was the last heartbeat of a man who refused to quit even after the world took everything from him. And somehow, impossibly, that heartbeat synced with Brenner's own. His hands that had spent 2 decades building structures for other people, ached for purpose again. So he slipped on August's old leather tool belt, the initials AV carved inside, and felt a spark ignite. He didn't decide it consciously, but from that moment forward, finishing August's work became more than curiosity. It became a calling, a map out of the wreckage of his own life. The mountain quiet held him steady until the outside world found him again. One afternoon, a truck rolled into the clearing. A woman named Iris, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, carrying groceries and stories. She knew August, knew his brilliance, knew his heartbreak, and she knew the man who'd spent years trying to buy this property out from under him. Preston Whitmore, a wealthy developer hungry to carve the mountain into vacation cabins. When Iris asked if Brenner planned to finish August's machine, he heard himself say yes before doubt could intrude. That yes rippled outward. His daughter Sophie, cautious but curious, arrived days later. She walked the workshop floors, listened to Brenner explain the pump's design, traced her fingertips along blueprints older than both of them. And slowly, an unexpected bridge formed between father and daughter, thin at first, then strong enough to hold the weight of forgiveness. But Whitmore returned too, polished and smiling, offering money Brenner desperately needed, insisting the cabin and land had more value demolished than preserved. Brenner refused, and Whitmore's smile curdled. Threats came next. Legal warnings, environmental claims, challenges crafted to drown an ordinary man in paperwork. But Brenner wasn't ordinary anymore. He had August's journals. He had neighbors. He had Sophie's belief. And deep inside the workshop, he had a machine capable of proving something Whitmore feared, that independence was possible. When Brenner discovered August's final letter, hidden in the cabin's stone foundation like a message to the future, everything changed. August had seen Whitmore coming. He'd prepared. He'd chosen Brenner, and he'd left instructions for the one piece that mattered most: the spring. The spring lay north of the cabin, flowing cold and clear even in winter. Its location wasn't marked on any modern map, a deliberate omission by August. But the hand-drawn diagram hidden in the foundation guided Brenner to it with eerie precision. When he first knelt beside that water, watching it spill over moss-covered stone, he felt something close to reverence. This was the lifeblood of August's dream, the source Whitmore didn't know existed, the key to the entire community system. With neighbors gathered, Brenner laid out August's plans for a 5-property network powered entirely by gravity and spring flow. Boyd and Iris signed on immediately. Francis Yates joined next. Even the skeptical Holcomb brothers eventually agreed. And then came the miracle Brenner hadn't dared to expect. Sophie's essay, written about August's design, won a statewide sustainability competition, earning a $5,000 grant she insisted on donating to the project. For the first time, the numbers worked. Spring arrived with mud, thawing earth, and a narrow window before runoff. The community carved trenches, laid pipe, poured foundations, all racing the clock. But progress stopped cold when Whitmore arrived with county officials and slapped a temporary halt on the work. A delay meant disaster. A delay meant failure. But the community adapted. They prepped everything they legally could, documented every step, worked in rain, mud, fog, tireless against the ticking season. And then Sophie captured the turning point on video. Brenner standing soaked in mountain rain, voice steadied, exposing Whitmore's motives to a news crew. The clip exploded online. Public pressure mounted, donations flowed, and suddenly, Whitmore wasn't in control anymore. The environmental review cleared with days to spare, and what followed felt like a race against nature itself. Trencher drums roared at dawn, pipe lengths thundered into place, mud clung to boots like glue. Sophie coordinated logistics with the precision of a field commander. Iris fed the crew warm meals that tasted like courage. Volunteers arrived from town, carpenters, laborers, retirees, students, drawn by the stories spreading across the state. And through it all, August's blueprints remained the heartbeat of the operation. On the 13th day, the work reached its climax. The pump station stood complete, steel gleaming under mountain sunlight. The distribution network connected 5 households. And then, with everyone gathered, Brenner opened the system. Water surged through the lines, clear, cold, unstoppable. A cheer rose from the crew. Tears streaked weathered faces. Sophie threw her arms around her father. The mountain itself seemed to exhale. Later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the sky burned orange, they mounted a bronze plaque beside August's original hand pump. He dreamed it, we built it. His legacy flows on. The documentary crew arrived days later. Experts visited the site, astonished by the system's efficiency. Requests poured in from other rural communities wanting guidance. Whitmore withdrew all legal challenges, battered by public backlash and political pressure. By summer, he'd sold his holdings and left Montana entirely. And as the mountains bloomed green around the cabin, Brenner realized the work was only beginning. August's dream was no longer confined to one man or one valley. It was spreading, carried by the people who believed in it, the people who built it, and the people it would help next. Summer deepened, and the mountains softened into warm gold. The water system flowed flawlessly, its quiet pulse echoing through every pipe, every garden, every home it served. Brenner spent mornings checking pressure valves and afternoons meeting with communities across Montana and neighboring states. Groups inspired by the viral video, the documentary, the simple idea that independence didn't have to be a luxury reserved for the wealthy. And Sophie, she blossomed. Her fall college plan shifted, not out of avoidance, but purpose. She wanted a gap year, not to run from education, but to run toward meaning. She wanted to help her father expand August's vision, consult on sustainable systems, assist communities that needed affordable water solutions. They worked side by side that summer, sketching new refinements, answering emails from small towns, planning workshops. Every evening, they sat on the same stone patio where August and Sarah once sipped coffee at twilight. Sometimes they talked about the past, Brenner's mistakes, Sophie's hurts, the years swallowed by distance. Other times, they simply watched the sun dip behind the pines, content in shared silence. And in those moments, Brenner realized something profound. The cabin hadn't just given him purpose, it had given him back his daughter. The neighbors gathered often, Boyd and Iris bringing vegetables from their flourishing gardens, Francis sharing pies, the Holcomb brothers swapping stories over steaming mugs of coffee. The land felt alive again. The cabin no longer sagged like a forgotten relic.
It stood firm, restored, respected, humming with new life. And whenever Brenner walked past the workshop, toolbox in hand, he felt August's presence there, not as a ghost, but as a quiet mentor whose work had sparked a revolution in one man, one family, one mountain, and soon, maybe far beyond. Autumn crept toward the valley, brushing the forest with hints of amber. On a crisp morning layered in soft blue light, Brenner opened a new leather journal, the kind August once filled, and began writing the next chapter. He wrote not as a man running from his past, but as someone building toward a future bigger than himself. He wrote about the spring still flowing strong, the water network thriving, the community stronger than ever. He wrote about Sophie, her grit, her brilliance, her heart, and how she had become the fiercest defender of the work he once doubted he could finish. And before he closed the journal, he wrote what mattered most, that the world is changed not by those who chase glory, but by those who quietly choose to build. When he stepped outside, the morning air felt sharp and new. The cabin doors creaked open behind him as Sophie emerged with rolled blueprints tucked beneath her arm. "Ready?" she asked. Brenner smiled, adjusting August's old tool belt around his waist. "Always." They walked together toward the truck, the mountains rising around them like guardians. Another community in Wyoming needed help. A group in Idaho wanted training. The work stretched far beyond the valley now, but its heart remained here, in the cabin built by a dreamer, in the pump designed by a man who refused to quit, in the legacy carried forward by people who believed in something better. As the engine rumbled to life, Brenner looked once more at the place that had rebuilt him. "Thank you, August," he whispered. "Your dream didn't die here." Then he drove toward the dirt road, toward the next mountain, the next community, the next life waiting to be changed.